All right, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'm sure we'll have a few more people joining us as we go, and welcome to those watching the recording as well. We will likely have a few more people joining us as we go, but not to delay the proceedings today, we're just going to start with a few introductory slides before I hand over to our speaker this morning. So we're very happy to have Mark Dixon joining us from the Strandloper Project. So we're very excited to hear about the project and how it's aiding towards citizen science and as well as data collection. Please feel free to reach out with any questions you may have after watching the recording. Then links for future webinars can be found on the Sustainable Seas Trust events page. And if you have any questions or queries, please feel free to reach out to us at webinars@scafrica.org.za. For now, I'm going to hand over to Mark. So over to you, Mark. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Tara. So Strandloper Project, basically we are a citizen science group, and we look at just trying to conserve marine biodiversity in the garden route. We started as a group that just wanted to clean up some snagged fishing tackle, mainly recreational fishing tackle, in January 2018 at Scherika's Point. And, you know, it just worked out that there was 100 meters of reef on the eastern side of the peninsula. And we managed to collect a whole lot of gear. We had 62 sinkers and a huge amount of monofilament. And we decided, well, let's go back 1 month later, and we picked up 64 sinkers and as much monofilament. So we had a replenishment rate for 100 meters of reef. And that then just opened up the question, what is the replenishment rate and what is the impact on the reef? So we started a couple of other areas just as a comparison. So we've got our primary sites are Scherika's Point, Swartflay Estuary Channel, and then the Knysna Heads. And each of them have different invertebrate composition on the reef and different types of reef substrates. So you've got alienites at the Scherika's Point, and then you've got sedimentary rock at the Knysna Heads, and then you've got a composition of sand or mixture of sand in the Swartflay Estuary Channel, and it's also mixed up with your fossilized stacks. So this, from what we initially had in those first two dives, we suddenly opened up a whole lot of different research fields. So ghost fishing is one of our big ones. And you can see a top slide there, small little shy shark caught and dying. But we also then got into entanglements, so bird entanglements and other animal entanglements. We've got reef degradation, and this is something that we didn't expect. So in the high cost zone, you get a huge amount of the invertebrate and the algal life on the reef is rubbed off as the terminal tackle is recovered after a cast. We've had reef regeneration, which is a fantastic one, and that we suspect is linked to climate change. And then slowly we started noticing dead zones, and on our 100-meter transect at Scherika's Point in particular, we noticed that about between 17 and 20% of our lead sinkers that we recovered were there were dead zones around that lead. So this led us to the concept of lead poisoning, and we then tried to test for that. Unfortunately, being a volunteer group, you know, doing lead poisoning is a costly expense, procedure. So we had to work out other methodologies. We also started looking at shark discards as an impact of the recreational fishing. And then you cannot get into the oceans nowadays doing any form of research without getting involved in plastic pollution. So if we just have a quick look at the variations of what we saw in terms of ghost fishing and the impact on the reef, the terminal tackle at Scherika's Point primarily gets snagged with the sinker. So what we find that the terminal tackle is more expensive. It's anywhere from 15 up to 85 Rand per setup. So indicating a certain LSM that's fishing there primarily. And as they retrieve, so they'll cast out over the reef, it goes onto the sand, and then as they retrieve, the sinker then snags into the rocks, and it leaves the baited hook floating above the seabed or the reef, which then becomes a prime candidate for the ghost fishing. So a fish getting caught onto that, not being able to get away because of the snagged tackle that's fixed to the reef, and then perishing. And then some research has shown that in particular hooks can catch up to 10 fish subsequently, as they eat on the dead fish on the hook before the hook disintegrates. So there is a potential of up to 10 fish per hook being killed from ghost fishing. By contrast, when we go to the Swartfly estuary channel, there we've got a variation. So we've got hand lines and rods being used, but much smaller hook sizes and much smaller sinkers, and the sinkers are usually in line. And the snagging occurs with the hook going into mussel colonies that are on the submerged reef and the columns in the channel where we do our surveys. So that doesn't necessarily pose a ghost fishing threat, but it does pose entanglement for particularly diving birds. So the likes of your cormorants. So in that area, you get the white-breasted and the Cape cormorants fishing in that area. So that's a potential threat to them. And then in the Knysna heads, once again, very similar to the Sedgefield estuary, is the small hooks and small inline sinkers, both hand line as well as small rods. And this time the fishing hook actually snags into red bait. So there's a huge amount of red bait encrusting the reef there. And so that's where your snagging occurs. Once again, not too much ghost fishing, but you've definitely got a threat of entanglement for a lot of your birds that go in there. So Cape cormorant again, and white-breasted cormorant. And then on the exposed reef, also your oyster catchers, black oyster catchers. So to date, we have, over the 5 years, documented 12 species of fish killed by ghost fishing, 9 of which were sharks and rays. So it's definitely skewed towards those species. Yeah, the impact is there. So that's the number of species, not the number of fish that have been killed by ghost fishing. Avian entanglements, some very unexpected ones, things like little egrets, and we've even had a heron getting entangled in the tidal pools at Herrickers Point. So the monofilament strands of that wrapping around the bird's legs, and as the tide comes in, they can't fly away, drowning and then perishing. Okay, the lead poisoning is quite an interesting one. So as I mentioned earlier on, accumulations of lead sinkers up to 20% on one particular rock in our Herrickers Point transect, and everything around that dies. Now, it's the extent that it kills everything is what we're trying to work out, but it's anywhere from about 1.5 centimeters up to about 8 centimeters from the accumulation of lead. We have had 2 particular gullies where we found a huge amount of lead, and those that image that you see there, that's exactly 100 pieces of lead, and it was recovered from one little gully in a massive accumulation, and that had killed out roughly 2 by 1.2 meters of reef around the accumulation of the lead. Very interesting. We removed all the lead, followed that up for the next 11 months with fixed point photography. We managed to document after 11 months recovery of algal and invertebrate growth on the barren rock. So there, definitely shows that if you remove the material from the reef, there is a chance of recovery. And we've also seen this with the monofilament. So the monofilament in those high cast zones will, do a lot of scraping, as will the terminal tackle. And as soon as you start removing that, you start getting a flush of algal growth coming back. And it's not immediate. So we've seen a lovely recovery in the last 5 years, and we hope to keep that. So one of the motivations is to go and clean up snag fishing tackle, recreational fishing tackle, just to allow the reef to recover, and then obviously increase your biodiversity. Fish discards, one of my personal hates is, that they are getting just thrown away, because as some people just say when you interview them, it's eating my bait, and to mitigate any future bait being eaten, just throw it up on the beach and let it die. So, South Africa's got a phenomenal array of shark species, one of the international hotspots for sharks along our coastline. And, research has shown that the higher your shark population density is, the more productive your ocean is in terms of fish species, both the number of species, the population density of the species, and the individual fish species size. And it's a counterintuitive thing, but this work's been shown all the way from the Mediterranean through to the Galapagos and other sites as well. So it is something that we try to share with local recreational fishermen and sustainable fishermen or subsistence fishermen, is that they should be returning their sharks. What we've also started seeing is, a couple of shark species in particular are succumbing to myopathy. So you have this challenge of landing your shark, and you fight it for, a couple of minutes to up to 90 minutes. I just saw recently a post where somebody was boasting they did 90 minutes to land a bronze whaler shark. And unfortunately, myopathy is something that does happen. So you land your shark, you get your brag photos for Instagram, and then you return it back to the ocean. And you're not sure what happens after that. And unfortunately, if you go and dive, you start seeing dead sharks at the edge of the reef. So we've seen this at a number of different sites, not only at our research sites, but other places as well. And so probably the one of the most susceptible sharks are the hammerheads, but also your spotted gully sharks are very susceptible. And we've also picked up a number of soup-fin sharks that are susceptible to myopathy. So that's a line of study that probably would be great to get more detail of just the impact of that on sharks with shark fishing, especially as it's becoming such a popular activity globally at the moment. Okay, so while you're spending all the time in the water, taking a lot of photos, a lot of video, you start noticing a couple of things. So these two images are very interesting. It's a fixed point photography site. And so the one on the left in October 2014 was actually trying to take a photo of the yellow belly rock cod, and had set up the camera and managed to get the photo. Very proud of myself getting the image. Fast forward to the end of 2019, start doing some BRUV work at exactly the same site, and reviewing the BRUV video, started thinking in the back of my mind, there's something different about the site. So a slightly different perspective, but exactly the same features are captured in those two images. And you can see on the first image, no of your sea fans in there, just a little bit of a sponge. And then on the right, basically 5 years later, you've got this flourishing colony of sea fans. So looked at a number of different reasons. Temperature change was something, sea temperature with climate change. But what we think is the main reason is the change in rainfall in the area. And so we put it down to that the Swartflame mouth is closed for a longer period of time than it used to be. And it's almost a reversal where it's now open for 3 to 5 weeks and closes for 6 to 12 months, whereas before it was open for 8 to 20 months and closed for 3 to 5 weeks. So you're getting less water going out and less agricultural chemicals flushing in there and allowing the reef to recover. But obviously, we need to do a lot more study just to get the exact mechanism of this change in the reef. And reviewing video and photographs in the different time spans, we've also seen an increase in some of the other areas of these sea fans. So there is a mechanism that's facilitating this. So to complement that, we started a bit of drone mapping. So we've got 3 primary sites for drone mapping. And this, so the mouth of the Toh River, the estuary, the Swartfly estuary, and the Kokama estuary. And what we're doing with this is we just want to look at what happens at the mouth, the sand buildup and everything else, and the duration that it's open. So we're just doing this automated flight survey. It's really great. You go put your drone, hit the go button, and it just goes and maps the same area. And you put that into GIS, and you can actually start seeing the changes. What is interesting is that with the Swartfly mouth in particular, so that's the one in the center at the top there, that hasn't opened. Now, the Swartfly and the Toh mouths are both managed estuaries, so Sandparks manages them. They've got a trigger height above sea level, and then they will dig a channel with a plug, so that when you get high rainfall, they can open the plug and then the water escapes. So going through the 22-23 summer period, we've had enough rain to open both the Toh, which is the bottom left, and the Kokama River, and that's photo there is literally 6 days before the mouth opened, and I've just noted a spelling mistake. So what's fascinating is that during the same period that the Toh and the Kokama mouths opened, the Swartfly didn't. And from our drone mapping, we've actually noticed that the water level dropped. And this we attribute mainly to a transition in agriculture upstream, with a huge amount of abstraction for different types of pasture management. So we've got center pivot irrigation, and I'm talking about a transition over 30 years. And then also in the last 7 to 8 years, an increase in various orchards, and particularly of macadamians, but also avocado pears now. So we've seen less water flowing into the Swartfly estuary as a result of these agricultural abstractions for irrigation. And then linked to that is the water source for Sedgefield also comes out of the catchment area for the Swartfly estuary. And we've seen a dramatic increase in the population of Sedgefield in the last 30 years, which would also attribute to a huge amount of water being abstracted for domestic consumption. So it just shows you the impact upstream and what that can have, and somehow this is linked to the change in the reef composition that we've mapped. Okay, so now you sit with 3 sites, you're getting a lot of information. What do you do and how do you compare it? So naively thought we'd start an expedition series and go along and do a whole lot of dives. The harsh reality is that when you're hiking vast distances, tides and sea conditions really limit your ability to go and dive. So we transformed the objective of our expedition series, of which we've done 4 to date, 855 kilometers, to monitoring plastics. So we've developed a methodology of sampling plastic. What most of our friends think and our family think we're doing is just having a jaw. What we're actually doing is some serious data collection, just some ideas of sampling. So we have modified the trash or the dirty dozen methodology of sampling to the trashy 20. And what we do is every 5 kilometers, we do a 10 by 2 meter transect, 3 of them, and we count every bit of plastic. And that can take quite a bit of time when you've got a sample site, as you can see in that 3rd image there, but even with the nurdles. So yeah, and from that you start looking at what is the origin of the plastic, and the harsh reality is the bulk of the plastic is over 80% is all shore-based. And we've also seen that we have a number of different drift distances that different plastic will cover. And so we've got a couple of indicator species, so sucker sticks and earbud sticks, bottle top lids, and cigarette butts. And with all their different drift distances, you can actually get an idea of how far you are away from the source of the plastic pollution entering the ocean. This just gives you an idea of where we've sampled. So each of those dots is where we've done a series of trashy 20 samples. We've got a bit of a gap there, which is between Bloemfontein and Arniston, and sadly that's basically, we have been denied permission going into Cape Nature's De Hoop to do our expedition across that. For the third year now, we're trying to get permission for that, and hopefully we'll get that right. But a huge amount of data collected there, all with the density and the distribution of different types of plastics. So a valuable data set to use, and we use that to go and inform municipalities of who's losing a huge amount of plastic into the oceans and trying to find out which is the source into the ocean. Nurdles, everybody had a big thing about nurdles in 2020. So we were the first to report the nurdle spill that occurred in August 2020. We picked it up on the 1st of October in Nature's Valley, and we started sampling that. The harsh reality is when we compile all our expedition data, these are nurdle distribution along the area, and even just on private outings to the west coast, still picking up a huge amount of nurdles. So nurdles have been considered or have been declared a major threat in the future to ocean biodiversity and particularly marine fauna. And it's something that needs to be evaluated in a much more closely. Basically, the threats there, they can degrade to microplastics. They surface area for microorganisms, which could infect the fauna that's ingested it. And then it also blocks the digestive tract of anything that's eaten it. And, you know, the little turtles, and particularly the small ones that get rescued in the winter months along the Garden Route and the Western Cape, most of them have plastic pollution and some of them nurdles. The middle image there was a white-chinned petrel, one nurdle, a whole lot of squid beaks, and it had just died from starvation. So that mimicked a full stomach, and it wasn't eating as a consequence of that. Fishing debris is something else that we see a lot of. So your commercial fisheries, you know, in addition to your recreational fisheries. And this was just a data set from our expedition last year in October from Storms River to Cape Recife, and just focusing here on crab pots and buoys. What is interesting that when you analyze this data, you can actually see that our marine protected areas are a targeted area for commercial fisheries. And you know, what's interesting with this one is when you have a look at all the distribution there of particularly the crab pots in the orange, they appear to be mainly east of the Titicaca Marine Protected Area, which finishes at Strand. But what's fascinating is if you look at the bottom right picture, that's of a safety helmet, and that's from the adventure activity that occurs at Storms River. And that we picked up 38 kilometers east of Storms River. So the person had lost it at Storms River and it drifted 38 kilometers. Now, if you take that drift into account and you go and reevaluate the location of those crab pots, that whole grouping and where they've washed up is about 38 kilometers east of the marine protected area. So once again, you know, take the drift into account. It shows you where the actual fishing is taking place. And that's something that needs to be evaluated more concisely. And you can even see that replicated around Sardinia Marine Protected Bay, which is a much smaller site. Okay, so what do you do with all of this? Well, we've got lovely databases, but we want to educate everybody. So we have open classrooms, are very popular with a lot of the homeschooling groups, but we've also got a couple of schools that we interact with and take them on outings. And then we've got a volunteer group that assists with cleanups, beach cleanups, and then also reef cleanups. So it raises awareness of what our findings are, and it stimulates a discussion within the local population on how to manage our marine and coastal areas to be sustainable. And obviously, once the public knows about you, anything washes up on the beach and the phones start ringing. So Strandloper Project is part of a much bigger marine stranding network, and we've been involved in a number of different activities of rescues and just monitoring or keeping public at bay of particular marine species when they get stranded, and then also sampling of those that are dead when they wash up. Okay, so we often get asked, well, what can we do? It's a big picture, it's a lot of plastic and that sort of thing. But yeah, there's a couple of things that you can do, and just basically make sure that you do the best to try and recycle and reuse your plastic where you are, and that your municipality is doing that. And if you're a fisherman, if you're regularly snagging your line in the same place, really evaluate moving and shifting your fishing to a different location where you're not going to do that. It's got a financial ramification for you. You're going to save a lot of money doing that, and the benefit is you're actually not going to destroy the reef, and your biodiversity is going to increase, and consequently you're going to have more fish to catch. And yeah, like with everything nowadays, if you don't have a digital footprint, then you're wasting a lot of time. So you can follow us. We are on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. We've also got some YouTube videos out there, and you can get to us via the QR code. And to everybody that looks after the ocean, thank you. And thank you for watching.
Thank you so much, Mark. That was really, really interesting to hear about all the work that you guys have been doing and the observations that you've had along the way. I see there are 2 questions in the Q&A box so long. Everyone else, please feel free to send through any questions you may have either in the Q&A box or in the chat. So the first one is saying, thanks, Mark, nice talk. What is your opinion about artificial breaching of estuaries as a management strategy?
I think, so it is very interesting, because if we look at the 3 estuaries that we're busy monitoring with our drone surveys, is 2 of them are managed and 1's not. The irony is it depends on how much urban settlement you've got flanking the estuary and what the damage is. And I think that's where the management comes in. So you've got a historical flood line, which has now gets covered. I've been living in the Garden Reef for just under 30 years. And in that time, the sea level has risen 12 centimeters. If you take the standard, and it's accelerated recently. So any storm surge that comes through is going to raise that. And you're going to have the subsequent impact when the estuaries are closed and open in terms of rain. Is it good? Is it bad? It's such a difficult one. If you want to take the human element out of it, let it work naturally. I mean, it's got a fantastic function in the Kokama estuary, just being a natural one. But you're not going to you're not doing a lot of damage to people. There's 1 or 2 pastures that are getting flooded. But when you go look at wilderness and you look at Sedgefield, what happens to residential property, then you've got other ramifications, and we've got to get that fine balance in there. So yeah, I haven't got any clear-cut answer on that, but there is a lot of data showing the benefit for the fauna in particularly Swartflei, but also the Tow River estuaries. So yeah, you've got to work with the data. That's the main thing.
Thanks, Mark. It's interesting to hear your take on that because obviously as you said, there's a lot to be said in terms of balance and maybe trade-offs on either side. The next question we have says, amazing talk, thank you. Could you tell me more about how you discard the lead that you find in your surveys? And has any research been done on the fish in those areas to test the levels of lead in them?
Okay, so I've got bottles and bottles. So we store them in 5-liter bottles of lead. So we don't discard it. We have given about 3 5-liter bottles. So it's probably about 80 to 90 kilograms of lead to a local NGO that builds statues and does mosaics, and they're busy building an ocean awareness mosaic and statue, and they're using our lead as a message as part integrated in that statue. So that's one of the things. We are also chatting to 1 or 2 sculptors to create lead items, and then the others we're probably just going to we all need dive belts when we're doing our diving, so we probably just melt them down for that as well. But we're not returning those lead sinkers to the fishing industry. We're trying to motivate for natural lead sinkers.
Okay, can you expand a little bit on natural lead sinkers?
So we're looking at different, so one is just using stones. So, you know, along the coastline, we've got a lot of sea-rounded stones, and, you know, that you seem to get these little groups of sizes, so smaller, medium, and then larger. And, you know, if you go and weigh those and you start using that, you can either drill a hole through them and use that as a sinker. We've had one of our local gentlemen, he's worked out a system of attaching a steel eye onto the stone so that it makes threading that much easier. And, you know, there is work being done internationally on that. We are also looking at investigating with a smelting business at looking at other inert materials that can be used. So there's a couple of things that are scrap that could be used that are not going to have an impact on the ocean.
Thanks, Mark. Just for it's useful to hear a little bit more about it and some of the examples that you mentioned. Then the next question is, the organization that I work for does a lot of work near Cape Recife. What were your findings around that area, and was there anything of particular interest?
Yeah. How long have you got? No, so I think one of the things that really was devastating around that area was just the sheer volume of plastic pollution. So there's a lot of picnic sites along that area. It seems to be very popular. We just happened to hike that section over the weekend, and we just saw the huge mass of people going and enjoying picnic sites and beverages. And things, you know, there's no facilities to clean up or put your material in there. There didn't seem to be staff tidying up. So it wasn't only plastic debris from those days. It was, you know, built up plastic debris. There's also a lot of inaccessible sections of coastline or very difficult to access. So obviously there's not the cleanup effort that's being done there. And I think so it's a public awareness thing that has to be done there. So the plastic pollution was a huge amount, you know, there that we found. And then the other sad thing is the squid jigs, huge amount of squid jigs. I didn't really get into that, but I mean, squid jigs along last year's expedition were just mind-blowing. We were filling up a 5-liter bottle per day of squid jigs. And I can't remember the numbers offhand on how many we managed to squeeze into a squid jig. Bottle tops, unbelievable amount of bottle tops, and plastic bottles, just crazy. And, you know, there's a financial value to both bottle tops and plastic bottles. It's roughly 4,500 Rand per ton. And, you know, I've interviewed people who collect a ton a week. And so that's, you know, just under 20,000 Rand or close to 20,000 Rand per month that someone just picking up plastic bottles is earning. Now, if we take our average salary in South Africa, and we see the amount of plastic that's sitting around, there's a lot of lost revenue for the recycling industry. So that was, definitely something that blew our mind. And then plastic packets. So it was very interesting. On the survey up to Cape St. Francis, very few plastic bags. To the west of Cape St. Francis, so between Storms River and Cape, from the Comtuous mouth to Cape Recife, a lot of plastic packets. And I'm talking, your shopping packets, your carry packets, and of all brands, from your, Woolworths down to your ShopRites to that. So all recognizable brands, lots of them. And just once again, not any idea. And that's the most we've seen on all our expeditions, is along that section. So there's something wrong in the system there, that those are getting into the ocean and washing up.
Okay, very, very interesting, Mark, in terms of the regionality of the litter items. I know you mentioned in your talk that you'd done a bit of amending to the Dirty Dozen. The data that you capture, is it logged on an app or linked to the region that you're sampling with GPS or anything like that?
So we use CyberTracker. Very good question. Thanks for that. Yeah. So we use CyberTracker. It's a fantastic resource, and to do that, and anyone that wants to log any georeference data. So that's the most important. So it's a georeference database, and so we do that. So while we modify the Dirty Dozen, is we put other elements in that we find a lot of. So the Dirty Dozen was evolved around the Cape Town trash sampling that was done there. You get to more remote areas, you start seeing other things, and some things that aren't relevant, and others that are. So we started looking at what were we picking up most, and that's where we added a couple of extra items on there. Most of them related to fishing activities, so recreational and commercial fishing activities. But yeah, that CyberTracker, we've got that database. Technology evades me on that. I'm supposed to be able to put it into cyberspace, so anybody that wants to use it can load it down, and it goes into a central database. Need to get somebody that's prepared to assist doing that, so we can make that more available. We could go the other route, creating a nice new app, but I just, CyberTracker is just simple, easy, and very efficient to set up and to analyze your data.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Yeah, it's very interesting to hear the app that you're using, because obviously the information you're collecting is linked to very specific sites, and I completely understand what you're saying in terms of adapting the data sheets for the region that you're sampling in and what you're finding there. The next question we have is, do you need a specific permit to conduct your benthic surveys? And if so, who did you go through to obtain those permits?
I might get myself into trouble here. So we have had permits for certain areas. So when we're in marine protected areas, we've got to go through the whole process there. So sand parks in particular has been very easy. Some of the Cape Nature reserves that we, marine protected areas and reserves, the local managers are part of our volunteer team, and they understand the value of what we do. So they will then, so I won't say they just streamline the process. But, some of the other areas, you're going along a section of coastline, you're taking photos, you're capturing data, we share it. So, we share our data with a lot of entities, and it's invaluable to them. So like Bayworld, for example, we share a lot of our marine mammal data with Dr. Hoffman. So, there's that component. So yes and no in terms of getting permissions.
Certainly. There's another question here that says, "Hi Mark, very interesting talk. You commented on the change in mouth dynamics of the spot flay. I was wondering, how far back do our historic records go that describe or mention mouth closures of the spot flay estuaries or other estuaries?"
So there is a comprehensive database that I know of that goes back about 30 years. It does extend beyond that. So it's open, close dates, and rainfall prior to that. So there's a data set and definitely would be accessible through sandparks, and that's for the Tow and the Swartfly estuary, for analysis and any other further studies. I'm sure that's something that could be arranged there. And it's something that once we start getting more and more of our drone mapping in, and we can show that, we'll probably marry the two sets of data up and, have a nice, concise and comprehensive document that we can publish.
Okay, wonderful. And then I see there's one other question remaining. So I think we can perhaps close with this one. There's a comment and then a question from the same person saying, "Thank you, Mark. I love the work that the organization does. I followed your last exhibition on Facebook and thoroughly enjoyed seeing the progress and challenges the group experienced each day." And then a question saying, "Can you share one of your favorite experiences from an expedition?"
There just are so many, but I think the most favorite thing is being to places that very few people go. So what we found is that most people will not go further than 4.5 kilometers from a parking spot next to the beach. So if your parking areas are 20 kilometers apart, you've got a nice gap that you're in a sweet spot that no one's going to, and you have that. But I think it's seen the oyster catchers, it's seen the evidence of the otters. Some of our whale sightings have just been spectacular. Favorite, the diving when the conditions are right. So I mean, one of the sites that I just would love to go back. Well, there's one of them, but there's a site just east of Storms River, and there's a gully that's on the Dolphin Trail, and there's this massive gully which is probably about 220 meters long, and it's about 30 meters wide at the widest and about 10 meters at the narrowest, and it's between 5 and 9 meters deep. And we went snorkeling in there, and that was just absolutely, it's one of those I have to go back locations. But then we've also had other locations like that. There's one at Krans Hook. It's got 3 massive caves, another gully, a nice big rock pool. Also one of those places, want to go back there and do that. So it's seen that natural beauty that we have along the coastline, and that there still are these pristine spots that we can visit.
Thanks, Mark. That's amazing and a really encouraging, a really encouraging closing and an encouraging favorite from your journeys. Because I think often if your expedition is collecting waste and sampling litter, and between the bottle caps and the fishing line, it's great to hear that there are some pristine places there, and that's really encouraging.
No, there's definitely. I mean, you've nailed it there. There's definitely highs and lows. You get to a point where there's, the whole group. So we're a core group on our expeditions of 6 hikers and then our backup team. And, you get to a point, and this is like, it's just plastic. It's layers of plastic. You can wade through it. Not quite on the far east scale of things, but it's just so depressing, and you can just see everybody's state of mind just drops to rock bottom. And then you go around the corner and you've got a clean section. It's eddies or whatever have kept it clean, and the whole group's attitude just lifts. So you've definitely got the downs and you've got the ups, and type of thing.
I can imagine it would be, if it was only the sections of plastic, it would be quite a struggle to get everyone on board to do another stretch, and I'm sure it would be a very different experience. But
yes, yeah, definitely. And then seeing this little guy that you see on the on the screen there, getting in the water, having someone just look at you like that, then you know why you're doing it.
Lovely. Okay, thank you so much, Mark. I don't see any other questions at the moment, but if anyone has any later stage, please feel free to email us at webinars@scafrica.org.za. We would love to hear from you, and we're happy to pass along any messages that you may send or any questions through to Mark and the Strandloper team. For now, I think we'll close off here today, and thank you everyone for joining, and thanks to those who are watching the recording. And a special thank you to Mark and to the whole Strandloper team for all the work that you're doing and the stories that you share along the way. I think it's for those of us who aren't privileged enough to sort of explore those areas and things like that, it's really great to hear the observations that you guys have had along the way and the awareness that you're raising.
Thank you very much, Tara, and thanks to Sustainable Sea Trust for the opportunity as well, and to everybody that supports us. That's, you know.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Please follow our events page to see about to find out about any upcoming webinars. We do have another series starting in February and March, so it'd be great to have you all there. Thanks, everyone, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday. Bye-bye.
Yeah, cheers.